having you here to talk about a little UAB Blazers.
All right. So the passing game was really cooking for the Blazers last season. They saw quite an uptick going from 200, a little under 203 yards per game in 2022 to almost 290 yards per game in 2023. Do you think that increased passing production last season was caused more by the game script where they were in a lot of high scoring games? Or do you think it was something that the coaching staff wanted to do and that it might continue this coming season?
It was definitely a decision by the coaching staff. That's something they wanted to do coming in, increase the passing game. Also, you enter a year without as big of an offensive line as you had the previous year, and Dwayne McBride, who led the country in rushing that year in 2022. So I mean, you got a lot of parts going from a massive rushing offense, and Trent Dilfer, he brings in a lot of guys. Alex Mortensen, who was a offensive analyst at Alabama for many years, to lead the offense. He brought a lot of guys in with a quarterback, background to kind of help develop that area. And so I think it was very much a decision to, go to the skies, increase the passing game a little bit, but also still relying on the run because they still had a lot of good running backs. You had Jermaine Brown Jr., who led them in almost every category in rushing, set the all-purpose career record for UAB last season. They want to run. They have Isaiah Jacobs. He got hurt midway through the year last year. Brother of Josh Jacobs, just as big and strong as Josh. I mean, he looks the part. So they got some guys. They want to run the ball, but they're also going to pass it because they got the quarterbacks and they've got the receivers to do it right now.
Speaking of that quarterback, last year, Jacob Zeno was a big part of that passing game. Obviously, he had a great season throwing for over 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns. How did he look in the spring?
He looked pretty good. He was comfortable. I think a year in that system made him a lot more comfortable. Just in making the reads, not holding on to the ball as long. In the spring game, he did throw a pick, didn't throw any touchdowns, but he was getting them, in the red zone, and the running game was taking over at that point. And his one reception was by true sophomore Chris Bracey, who had a great year last year as a true freshman. But he is still very much in control of this offense. He's very comfortable. He knows where everybody's going to be at. So I don't see anybody unseating him. But behind that, you got a lot of quarterbacks that can compete for that second, third spot.
Yeah, that's kind of leading to my next question was how did that backup quarterback competition kind of shape up? Did anyone emerge or still very much a competition?
I would say it's still pretty much a competition. There was a lot of, they went through about every quarterback except for Carter Putt. It was a junior college transfer last year. He was about the only one, and Jalen Kitna. Both of them didn't play in the spring game. Probably just a little bit hampered a little bit, but it seems to be, you're going to look at Harrison Barker, son of Jay Barker, who led Alabama to a championship in 1992. He is there. He was their third string last year, although he did start a game for them. You got Landry Liddy, who was a Louisiana Tech transfer, and Trace Campbell. All three of those guys will be competing around that second, third, fourth spot. I think Putt and Kitna will probably be competing into it next year. Well, Putt will be a senior this year unless he takes a COVID waiver. But it looks to be that it'll be Barker, Landry, and Campbell vying for that second and third spot.
One of the young quarterbacks who I think was there for spring practice. You haven't mentioned him before. I'm just kind of curious how he looked, and that was true freshman Adrian Posse. I think he was a big recruiting win for UAB this past season.
Absolutely. I think he's a guy they're going to want to develop and possibly make him a multi-year starter in the coming years. I think he got a series in the spring showcase, spring game, whatever you want to call it. It was essentially a spring game. They just didn't have it in the stadium. But he played a series. He looked well. I think he completed 3 passes. I think he might have been 3 or 4. Not a whole lot of reps passing in the spring game, but during the practice, he got enough reps. So, that's something Differ likes to do with his quarterbacks, give them plenty of reps. They've got a lot of different teams that they can work with these quarterbacks. So I think, he's going to be a development guy. He's obviously going to take a red shirt this year, but I think, he has the traits that they want in a quarterback, especially with the group they have with Nick Coleman and Alex Morton, like I said, and Trent Dilfer, who led the Elite 11 QB camp for many years. So, I mean, it's going to be very much a QB factory in the coming years.
How would you describe, for folks that probably haven't watched Adrian play, how would you describe his style of play?
He's very much in the pocket. He can move a little bit and make some plays outside. But I mean, he's very much in the pocket. He's going to make his reads. He's going to read the defense. He's going to play quarterback. He's not going to rely just on his athleticism, which he has some. But he's going to get in there. He's going to do the studying of the playbook. He's going to read the defense. He's going to make the correct calls and put his team in the best position to be successful.
Thank you.
And then you talked about Jermaine Brown and setting some records last year. Well, now you got to replace the do-it-all back in Jermaine Brown this season. How did that running back group shape up this spring?
Well, there was not a very large group. You had Isaiah Jacobs still recovering from an injury. Armani Goodwin, LSU transfer, he got hobbled a little bit during spring practice, so he didn't play in the spring game. So they only had 3 healthy running backs in the spring game: Lee Beebe, Lee Witherspoon, and Dylan Peterson, a walk-on. All of them played pretty well. You also had Terrell McDonald, a tight end, lining up at fullback and breaking off a 30-something yard run in the spring game. It was pretty cool because Terrell McDonald's a pretty big dude at tight end. But you're looking at Lee Beebe. He's really good in the passing game as well. He can he can come out of the backfield. He's really good and crisp on those running back routes. So you're going to look at Isaiah Jacobs and Lee Beebe and Armani Goodwin as kind of a 3-headed monster. Maybe not to replace Jermaine Brown, but they all have the ability to do the things that he did, all 3 of them. I mean, especially Isaiah Jacobs. He's just a very large running back, but also fast. So he can really get in there, get into the, first, second levels, when there's a lot of chaos going on, and he can break loose if he needs to.
So you kind of see it more of that 3-headed approach or 3-back rotation approach as opposed to kind of a true workhorse back this year.
I would imagine so. They're going to get a lot of reps for those guys. They want to keep fresh guys on the field. They don't want to wear a guy down too much. But if a guy's got the hot hand, they're going to run with that as well, as most coaches would do. If you got a guy who's just breaking it off almost every other down, then you got to keep with the hot hand. So I think that's something they like to do. But also they're going to try to game plan with these 3 running backs who all have a variety of abilities to showcase on the field.
Did you have any information or were you able to glean anything this spring about how Goodwin and Jacobs' recoveries are progressing or going?
They're going well. I think Armani was just he got hobbled a little bit. He still looked good, in the few practices he had before that injury. But he's I think he's going to do well. He was a local guy, so he's got a lot of spirit in him to play for UAB after being at LSU. So he's going to be a guy that I think they're going to look to kind of be, a pass-in, third down back kind of guy. But you also got Lee Beebe and Isaiah Jacobs. I think those 2 will be your main 2 backs, but I think Armani's going to, really slide in there and kind of be that third guy that surprises a lot of people. But I think Isaiah, I think it was more of just, let's take the spring off. Let's make sure, you're well enough. Let's not put you in there too quick. So I think both of them will be ready for fall camp.
Awesome.
Moving over to the wide receivers, they lose one of their leaders in Tawan Palmer, but they do return exciting freshman Amari Thomas, who had an outstanding year last year. As a true freshman, he set the UAB freshman receptions record with 53 catches. Can you tell us how he looked this spring? And do you think he's kind of the next man up and ready to lead this group?
I believe so. He'll be their primary receiver coming into this year. He's obviously in a freshman, he had a great freshman year, and throughout the offseason, he just got a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. He's running crisper routes. He's becoming more a complete receiver, which will help them so much. He's been, used in the running game before. So he's just a great athlete you can put in a lot of different places to use. And, outside of him, you're looking at a lot of other younger guys that stepped up during spring practice, as well as some of the guys that returned. You got TJ Jones, a senior. He used a COVID waiver and was able to come back, a Penn State transfer from a few years back. He's a guy that's been used in the running game as well, along with Brandon Buckhalter. They got some really fast guys they can kind of run those jet sweeps and reverses with, and they've been able to gain some big yardage in that last year. So I think they're going to continue to do that with the receivers, use them downfield, use them intermediate routes, as well as use them behind the line of scrimmage, coming out of the backfield and making big plays in the running game.
Who else would you expect maybe to step up and join Thomas as starters in that group?
I think, obviously, like I mentioned, TJ Jones, you got Malachi Holt Bennett. He was an Indiana transfer from last year. But I think you're going to look at some of the younger guys as well. Cam Shanks had an incredible spring practice. I believe he caught 2 touchdowns in the spring game, had over 100 yards. He's a guy who's got incredible speed as well. So I think that's a guy you can use for a deep threat as well as using him in the backfield. Like I said, they're going to use a lot of these guys. But I think Cam Shanks is probably the receiver who had probably the best spring. But you're also looking at a lot of these other guys. Corey Milliner, he had a couple really big catches in the spring game. He's also another redshirt freshman who came in last year. So you got a lot of these young guys who are going to step up. But you still got some some old guys there that are still very experienced. Like I said, Malachi Holt Bennett, TJ Jones. So it's a mix of young and old, but I think the young is going to start producing a whole lot more this season.
One player that you mentioned that I was really excited for when he came in, I believe he came over from Ole Miss, and that was Brandon Buckhalter. What can you tell us about him?
Oh, he's he's like Shanks. He's a really fast guy. They used him last year in the kind of reverse jet sweep kind of action. So they used him with his speed to get him out on the edge a whole lot. He also went down the field, had a couple downfield passes as well. So he's a guy who's got the speed to break it open in a game. It's just about trying to find the right matchup for him in that game because, like I said, he's got the speed to burn, and he's definitely going to be a guy who can take the top off if need be.
I do have one question about the spring game. Did they line up ones versus ones? Because I know one of the big things that came out of the spring practice was Thomas was, on fire. What is it, like 8 or 9 receptions for like 80, 90 yards, something like that, and a touchdown? Was it ones versus ones or was it ones versus twos? Because sometimes, people lose sight of that. They see the stats and like, oh, this is, the
I
next.
think there were some ones versus ones at times. I think later on when you got into the second half, you started seeing twos and threes. But I mean,
Okay.
they kind of mix and match a whole lot because there was no real true format as far as 1A or one offense, two defense versus two offense, one defense. So it was more just offense versus defense. But I mean, the defense has definitely made some strides from last year, just in what they were able to showcase in the spring game, and they got a lot of young guys, as well as some transfers that have come in to really help that defense.
Did they talk about how those teams got comprised? I know some schools will have captains pick and then some the coaches pick. Did they talk about how those teams were formed?
No, not really. I think they just kind of went in, what they had as far as a depth chart at that point. Obviously, it's not, set in stone or anything with it only being a spring practice, but I think they just kind of made a depth chart out of that along with their QBs, their offensive line, and really as many receivers and running backs they got. They just really had all those guys kind of subbing in and out throughout the game, as long with their tight ends. But I think more so than anything on the offense, I think you would just see the change really more so in the offensive line and QB because with the running backs, so few running backs available during the spring, they were having to use all of them at all the time. And a lot of the receivers got a lot of reps. So I think you're just looking more offensive line QB kind of teams at this point.
Awesome. Tight end Bryce DeMoss had a good season a year ago. How did he build on that this spring?
He just keeps building. He's become just a better tight end, understanding the system a little bit better. Obviously, that's being as much of a passing game as it is, they want to feature their tight ends. They've got good tight ends. J.C. Sibley was a young guy last year. They're really high on. He ended up getting injured. So you're looking at Bryce Davis, Dallas Payne, and Terrell McDonald as your main three guys. They're all seniors. Use their COVID waiver this past year, so they were able to come back. But Bryce is, he's going to be that leader. He had a big, I think, about a 40-something yard catch in the spring game. So it's going to be something they look to increase. Maybe not as much as they did last year, but they want to increase that number of reps that they get in the game and utilize those tight ends because as we see in today's game, the tight end is becoming more of a glamour position than what it once was.
With the loss of Palmer, do you think they're going to use the tight end more in the offense, or?
I think so, because like I said, Bryce, he can get out there. He's got the speed as a tight end to get open. He's a bigger guy. He's a mixed match guy. He's a matchup nightmare for guys. Along with Dallas Payne, he's more of a kind of a big receiver type. Terrell McDonald he can kind of do everything. He can catch, he can block, he can come out of the backfield. As I mentioned earlier in the spring game, had a 30-something yard run. So they got those three senior tight ends are going to be guys that they can really use in a lot of different ways. So I think you're going to see very much an uptick. Because like I said, last year they didn't get as much as they would have liked, but I think this year is definitely going to be an uptick in that tight end production.
Moving on to the offensive line, you mentioned them earlier. Good news perspective, they seem like they returned just about everyone at least from a starter's perspective from a year ago. But the bad news, they ranked 100th out of 133 in terms of sacks allowed. How do they look this spring, and do you think they're going to be able to improve upon that pass protection?
They look better than what they did last year. I think the increase in defensive talent. You look at the spring game. Zeno got sacked 5 times. Of course, that spring game he can't be tackled, so just to get in touch it counts as a sack. But that defensive line had a lot of push there, a lot of pass rush in the spring game. But I think the offensive line, it's a building, and pretty much all bets are off for starters. About the only one you could really pencil into a starter position at this point would probably be Brady Wilson at center. Pretty much all the other positions are up for grabs. You have Will Parker, who was left tackle last year, a Tennessee transfer. Right now, he's battling with a redshirt freshman, Jordan Hall. Just finished a piece on him yesterday, I believe. And he's working. I believe he started the left tackle position in the spring game. So, I mean, there's a lot of a competition along that offensive line. They got a lot of young guys who are big, they're wide, they're long. Maybe not the heaviest, but that's kind of what they want. They want lighter on their feet guys who can pass block, who can get out and help in the run game, pulling guards, guys who can, are athletic and can move and, not just be the pillars that you have sitting there not moving much. You need to have some guys with athleticism because as you see the defensive line and edge rushers today, they're even more athletic. So you got to have those athletic offensive linemen. And I think that's what they've really tried to do. And you've seen that this spring with a lot of these younger guys competing with some of the returners that came and some even, advancing past them at the end of the spring. Although in the fall, we'll see a lot more probably intense competition from that position.
If you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season here in 2024, who do you think that would be?
I think you're looking at Cam Shanks. Just what he was able to do in the spring, he really showcased that he's a guy that they can count on. He's like Amari Thomas. He can get a lot of catches. He can run medium routes. He can run long routes. He can be used in the backfield. So it's a very much an Amari Thomas 2.0 type of player. Although he came in the same class as Amari Thomas, Amari was just a little bit more ready to go as far as his receiving skills. I think Shanks had to learn a little bit more. He was a great returner in high school. He had like 3 or 4 return touchdowns, quite a few receiving touchdowns because he's probably one of the fastest players on the field. But going to college, he had to learn a little bit more of the finer details of the position, blocking downfield, running crisper routes, being where he needs to be on each play, on each snap. So I think he's going to be the guy you're really going to look at offense that has a really breakout year. But you could also look at, Lee Beebe, he had a great end to last year at the running back position. And with him and Isaiah Jacobs kind of teaming up, I think you're going to see Beebe have a lot more production than he did last year. But, odds on right now, I would look at Cam Shanks.
Going back to the receivers real quick, last year it seemed like Palmer and Thomas kind of split their time evenly, and swap back and forth between outside and slot. Do you kind of see that playing out with Shanks and Thomas, or do you think one of them is going to primarily be the slot guy and one's going to primarily be outside?
I think they're just going to move them around as much as they can. I think that's the idea behind Dilfer's offense. He wants every receiver to be able to, play an X, play a Y, play a Z, whatever you want to call it, whatever system you use. He wants those guys to be able to do everything as far as the receiving position. So I think you're going to look at those guys. They're going to continue to be matched up with different players, just trying to find that matchup advantage on the field. And I think that's what you're going to see from this passing game is just, guys moving around. You're not going to have one guy as a primary outside. You might have 2 or 3 guys that can, line it up outside and do it well. You might have 5 or 6 guys that can run a slot very well. So I think that's just, their idea is to get every guy capable of doing everything. So you're never really, lacking for anything on the offensive side. The only thing that they really need is the consistency of, catching balls and, having that consistency in a game instead of just, going against air like you would in practice.
Good stuff.